Teja, you ever have a single moment that shatters everything you thought you knew? Mine came on an ordinary Sunday evening. The sun had just dipped behind the hills, painting my small apartment in tired orange light. I'd just finished sending some money to my parents. My monthly ritual of helping out, as I called it. Rent, groceries, medical bills, whatever they needed, I was there. I told myself I was doing it out of love, out of gratitude for the people who raised me. But love feels different when it's taken for granted. I just didn't know it yet. Tada, my phone buzzed. A message from my uncle, with a file attached. Listen to this. To no explanation. No context. Just that. Cha-cha curiosity pulled me in. I pressed play. Cha-cha at first, it was just familiar voices. The kind that bring comfort before they destroy you. Then I heard my father's laugh, low and careless. My mother's sigh followed, the kind that used to mean worry but now sounded almost smug. Cha-cha, then the words came. Cha-cha, he's basically our ATM, my dad said, chuckling. As long as he keeps sending money, we don't have to worry about a thing. Cha-cha, my heart froze. So silence filled the room, except for that laughter echoing through the recording. Cha-cha, you really think he won't stop? My uncle's voice asked in the background. Ta, stop. My dad snorted. He's too guilty to stop. He thinks he owes us for his whole life. Cha-cha, I couldn't breathe. The world tilted. Every sacrifice. Every night I skipped dinner to send them more. Every tear I swallowed when I couldn't afford something for myself. It all turned into fuel for their joke. I replayed it. Twice. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I couldn't believe that he had said it. The man who once told me, family comes first. The man whose approval I'd spent my whole life chasing. Joda, my fingers trembled as I texted my uncle. Why did you send this to me? He replied after a minute that felt like an hour. It wasn't meant for you. It was meant for your dad. So it was an accident. A cruel, divine accident. And yet, somehow it felt like fate had finally peeled the mask off. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, letting the silence drown me. The kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, but from clarity. In that stillness, something inside me broke. But something else began to wake up. If they saw me as their ATM, I thought, maybe it was time to close the account. And that's how my revenge started. Not with anger, but with awareness. Not with shouting, but with silence. The kind of silence that makes people wonder what's coming next. Silence can be louder than any scream. After that night, I didn't call home. I didn't text. I didn't send money at the start of the month like I always did. I just disappeared into my own world. It wasn't revenge yet. It was observation. I wanted to see what they would do when the stream they'd been drinking from ran dry. The first few days, nothing. Then, the messages started. Hey, son, hope you're doing okay. Just checking in. Then another one. This time from my mom, Your dad's medicine is running low. Could you please send something soon? Every word used to pull guilt out of me like a reflex. But now, the words hit a wall. I'd listened to that recording so many times that I'd memorized the tone, the laughter, the betrayal. Their voices had turned from comfort to chains. A week passed. 2. Then my dad called. His voice was cheerful at first. Too cheerful. Hey champ, everything good? Been busy? I kept my tone flat. Yeah, busy. He hesitated. We didn't get your usual transfer. Something wrong. I took a deep breath. No, just thinking of making some changes. Changes, he repeated, a hint of irritation leaking through. Yeah, I said, my voice steady. Thinking of learning what happens when an ATM goes offline. The silence that followed was heavy. I could almost hear his heartbeat through the phone. What's that supposed to mean? He snapped. I almost laughed. I think you know what it means. He didn't reply. He just hung up. That night my uncle texted me again. You heard it, didn't you? I stared at the screen, unsure what to say. T.S. Pause. Then, you deserve to know. Why did you record it? Because I was tired of watching them use you. It was strange. This uncle had never been close to me. Always quiet at family gatherings, always on the sidelines. Maybe he'd seen something I hadn't, all these years. Maybe he'd been waiting for me to open my eyes. Cao, I didn't reply again, but something settled in my chest, calm determination. Revenge wasn't going to be loud or cruel. It was going to be clean, like cutting off a rotten branch so the tree can finally grow straight. The next morning, I opened my laptop and started calculating. All the years of money transfers, the tuition payments I'd covered for my siblings, the mortgage I helped pay off. I made a list, item by item. By the time I was done, I stared at the total. The number could have bought me a house. Or two. And for the first time in my life, I realized just how much I'd been worth to them. Not as a son, but as an investment. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me focused. They had built their comfort on my guilt. Now, I was going to rebuild my peace on their confusion. You know what happens when people are used to having control over you. The moment you stop giving them what they want, they start losing their minds. By the third week, my parents' messages turned from sweet to sour. Are you ignoring us now? My mother wrote. You think money makes you better than your family. I stared at the words, wondering if she even realized the irony. For years, they measured my love in numbers. Now, my silence was the most expensive thing they'd ever received. Then came my father's call. No greetings this time. No fake warmth. Just anger. What's your problem, huh? Your mother's worried sick, and you're acting like some big shot. I stayed calm. Dad, I think it's time you both handled your own expenses. I've been helping for years. I need to focus on myself now. He scoffed. Focus on yourself. Everything you have we gave you. I let that sink in for a moment before answering quietly. And everything you took. I gave you? Maybe we're even now. He shouted something before hanging up. I didn't listen. I didn't have to. Because for once, I wasn't the one apologizing. That night, I took another step. One that would make them realize this wasn't a tantrum, it was transformation. I called my bank and closed the shared account that I'd set up years ago to make transfers easier. Then I updated all my passwords, changed my number, and locked down every link they had to my finances. It was terrifying and freeing. The next few days were quiet again. Then my younger sister reached out. Her voice was hesitant, almost rehearsed. Bye, Mom and Dad are really upset. They said you've changed. I sighed. I have. I had to. She went silent for a while before whispering. They said you called them users. I smiled sadly. I didn't have to say it. They proved it. Something in her tone shifted then, confusion mixed with shame. They shouldn't have said that about you, she murmured. My heart softened a little. She was innocent in all this. Listen, I told her gently. You don't owe them your peace either. Just be smart, okay? She nodded quietly. I could hear her fighting tears. After we hung up, I felt something strange, a flicker of guilt trying to claw its way back in. But I didn't let it. Because guilt was the leash they'd used to lead me for years. That night, I wrote a letter, not to send, but to remind myself why I was doing this. In it, I wrote, love doesn't need receipts. And family shouldn't come with interest rates. Then I folded it and placed it in my desk drawer, next to my uncle's recording. The symbol of betrayal that had become the key to my freedom. They still didn't know what was coming next. Because my revenge wasn't about money. It was about balance. And balance was about to be restored. I didn't want a scene. I wanted the kind of reckoning that sits in the room long after the lights go out. The kind that rewires someone's conscience instead of just bruising their pride. So I made a plan that was surgical, patient, and, above all, public in a way they couldn't gaslight away. For weeks I watched them from the outside, like a sculptor studying a block of marble, where the cracks were, where the support had been, who in the family had been quietly watching the erosion. There were cousins who'd long suspected my parents, double life of frugality and comfort, an aunt who'd always felt uneasy about how I'd been pulled in whenever there was a problem, and a handful of old family friends who still answered calls when something real happened. I started by inviting those few. No drama, no accusation, just a small dinner to catch up at my uncle's house where the recording had originated and where the betrayal had first been heard. I told no one else. The guest list was quiet, the people most likely to care and least likely to collude. I cooked because I wanted the night to feel ordinary. I wanted the betrayal to feel extraordinary by contrast. When everyone had eaten, and the polite laughter settled into that comfortable half, silence families always have, I asked for their phones and their attention. I told a neutral story. How an old message had landed in my inbox by mistake. How hearing it felt like watching a mirror crack. I played the recording. I let my father's voice, so familiar for so long, spill into a room full of witnesses. I let every chuckle, every offhand, ATM, land on ears that had previously heard only good son stories. The air changed like a tide reversing. I watched eyes dart to my mother's face and then away. Saw hands go slack around wine glasses. Noticed the cousin who'd once defended their choices look suddenly ashamed. But I didn't rise to shout. I didn't demand apologies. Instead, I read aloud the ledger I'd made. Dates, amounts, tuition payments rotated through me, the mortgages quietly steadied by my transfers, item by item. A ledger that translated kindness into commerce. I spoke softly about the nights I'd skipped meals to cover meds, about the promotions I'd refused to celebrate because I had to make rent for them that month. I told them I wasn't asking for money back, I was asking for truth. And then I did something small and deliberate. I handed the aunt a set of bank statements and asked her, quietly, to verify them for me. No scandal, just confirmation that what I said was real. She stared, then nodded, then looked around the room as if someone had finally turned on the light. My father's face drained of color. My mother's fingers fumbled with a fork that no longer had purpose. The cousins exchanged glances. One of them, a man who had always been blasé about family drama, stood and walked over to my father. He didn't shout. He asked one question, simple and civil. Did you think he wouldn't find out? My father's throat worked. The only sound was the table's wooden grain, creaking under the strain of everything unsaid. That night wasn't a massacre. It was exposure. They weren't pilloried so much as revealed. And revelation is its own punishment. Worse, because it's quiet and lasting. People left the dinner differently than they'd come, not angry, not fully reconciled, but aware in a way that cheap excuses can't patch. I went to bed with the recording and the ledger in my drawer, and something I hadn't expected. A small, steady warmth that came from knowing I'd stopped feeding a myth. Revenge, I realized, didn't have to be loud to be lethal. Sometimes the purest justice is simply the light of truth, turned deliberately toward those who have been living by shadows. Jaja. The next morning, my phone started ringing before dawn. First it was my mother, 5 missed calls in a row. Then my father. Then my cousin who had been at the dinner. I didn't answer any of them. I sat by my window with a cup of coffee and watched the sun rise, the light spilling like quiet vindication across my table. For years, I'd greeted every morning with a sense of duty. That day, for the first time, I felt something different, peace mixed with power. By the time I finally checked my messages, the family group chat was on fire. My father had written, I can't believe you'd humiliate us like that. Were your parents? My mother followed. You made us look like monsters in front of everyone. How could you? I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling a strange detachment, like I was reading the story of someone else's life. Then I typed back. I didn't make you look like anything. You just got to see yourselves through my eyes for the first time. They didn't reply. By noon, the story had spread quietly through our extended family. My parents' image, the perfect couple who'd raised a successful son, was cracking. People were whispering, not with hatred, but with disappointment. That hurt them more than any accusation could. They'd built their lives around respectability, and I'd taken it away with one recording. That evening, my uncle called me. You did what needed to be done, he said, voice calm, but be prepared, they'll try to play the victims now. I know, I replied. They've practiced that role all their lives. He sighed. You okay? I'm lighter, I said truthfully. For the first time in years. Later that week, I got a message from my sister again. She'd been quiet since the dinner. Mom's been crying, she wrote. Dad's not talking to anyone. Everyone's acting like you destroyed the family. Tai took a deep breath and typed back ta. Maybe it needed to be destroyed to be rebuilt right. Ta, she didn't reply for a while. Then she sent a single line that made me pause. Ta, I understand now. Ta da da. That night, I went through old photos, birthdays, graduations, family trips, and felt a dull ache, not of regret, but of release. I realized something: the person I used to be, the son desperate for approval, was gone. The man who replaced him didn't need validation, only honesty. Tad, I donated a large sum to a local charity under my parents' name, not to make peace, but to redefine the meaning of giving. It wasn't about guilt anymore. It was about purpose. If they'd seen me as an ATM, I would show them what real generosity looked like. Clean, detached, and no longer theirs to control. A few days later, I got one more message from my father. Ta, you've changed. Ta, I looked at the text for a long time before replying. Ta, no, Dad. I finally stopped pretending. Ta da da da, and in that simple exchange, the years of manipulation ended. Da, but this wasn't the end of my story. Because revenge isn't complete when you expose someone. Da, it's complete when you rebuild what they broke, stronger, and without them. Da da jaku, da, when you've spent your whole life giving to others, learning to give to yourself feels strange. Almost selfish. But it's not. It's survival. After the fallout, the silence from my parents stretched for weeks. At first, it was unsettling, like walking through the ruins of a home you once knew. But then, slowly, the quiet became comfortable, like fresh air after years of smoke. Tete, I started focusing on myself, something I hadn't done in years. I picked up projects I'd abandoned. Worked longer, not out of pressure, but out of passion. For the first time, my success belonged to me. I didn't have to calculate who would benefit or who would take credit. Every hour, every achievement, every smile felt earned. Ted, I moved to a new apartment in the city. Nothing extravagant, just a space that felt mine. No shared accounts, no financial guilt. No midnight calls asking for a small favor. I filled the walls with things that made me happy: photographs from trips I'd always postponed, a painting my sister had made when she was 12, a small plant I somehow managed not to kill. Tada, one evening, as I was setting up my new office, I got a message from my old college friend, Imran. He ran a startup focused on financial education for underprivileged youth. Heard what happened, he wrote. And I think you could help us build something good out of it. Tata, I met with him the next day. The idea was simple but powerful. Teach young people about boundaries, about financial self-respect, about the emotional cost of being everyone's provider. I told him my story, not in detail, but enough for him to understand. And from that pain, something new was born: a platform where I could turn my past into purpose. Tata, months passed, and the project grew. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about reclaiming power. I watched students learn what I never did: how to say no without guilt, how to give without losing themselves. Each workshop felt like a small revenge, not against my parents, but against the version of me who once thought love had to be bought. Teja, then one day, while preparing a presentation, I received an unexpected email. Chafram Mom, sa subject proud of you. So the message was short. Teja, your sister showed us your program. We didn't realize how much we took from you until we saw what you're giving others. We're sorry. Teja, I stared at it for a long time. The apology felt heavy, clumsy, but real. For years, I had fantasized about hearing those words. Now that they'd come, I didn't feel triumph. I felt closure. Teja, I didn't reply immediately. I took a walk that night under a cold sky, the city lights flickering like quiet applause. I realized revenge wasn't about making them hurt. It was about showing them what they'd lost. Teja, when I finally replied, I wrote to Dach. Thank you. I hope you're both okay. I'm doing better now, really. Teja, no anger. No bitterness. Just peace. The kind that comes when you stop trying to fix people and start healing yourself. Tenja, that was the real revenge. Ja, to live well, freely and without guilt. Ja, but life had one more twist waiting. A test to see if I truly meant it. Teja Jaku, Jaja, time is a strange thing. It softens edges but never erases the lines. A year had passed since that dinner, since the silence, since I had stopped being their endless stream of sacrifice. My life had changed. No, I had changed. But the universe has a way of circling back, testing the strength of the walls you build around your peace. Tada, it was a Sunday morning when I saw them again. My sister had invited me to her graduation. I almost didn't go, afraid the old wounds might reopen, but something inside whispered, "You've earned the right to stand tall." Tada, when I arrived, they were already there. My father, older and quieter than I remembered. My mother, her smile hesitant, her eyes heavy with things unsaid. I walked toward them calmly, no bitterness, no fear. Just distance, the healthy kind. Tada beta, my mother said softly, her voice breaking on the word. Ta mom, I replied, polite neutral. Ta my father gave a small nod. You look good, he muttered, as if the words tasted strange in his mouth. Ta, thank you, I said simply. Tada, the ceremony started, and we sat in the same row. 3 people who once shared everything, now separated by invisible walls of truth. When my sister's name was called, pride filled my chest. She crossed the stage, radiant and free, holding her degree like a promise. Our eyes met briefly, hers glistening with tears, and in that second I realized she wasn't just my sister anymore. She was my ally. She had seen the truth and grown stronger for it. Tensa, after the ceremony, we gathered for pictures. My father tried to hand me his phone to take one of the family. I hesitated for a moment before taking it. As I framed the shot, he said quietly, "We've been trying to be better." Tadja, I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't see power. I saw remorse. Ta, my mother added, "We know we hurt you. We don't expect you to forgive us right away, but thank you for coming." Tadja, there was a time when I would have melted at those words, when guilt would have pulled me right back into their orbit. But I'd learned something powerful. Forgiveness doesn't mean re-entry. It means release. Tadja, I'm happy for you both, I said quietly. I really am, but I'm not the same person anymore. I had to learn to stop being what you needed so I could become who I am. Teta, my mother nodded slowly. My father looked away, blinking hard. For a man who once measured love in money, silence had finally taught him value. Tata, we took the photo. The 3 of us smiled, awkward but real. For the first time in years, there was no performance, no manipulation, just truth, standing quietly between us. Tata, as I walked away later, I realized my revenge was complete. Not because they had suffered, but because I no longer did. They would spend the rest of their lives remembering the son who once gave them everything, and the man who learned to give himself peace instead. Teta. That's the thing about poetic justice. It doesn't scream. It simply stands tall and lets the echo of truth do the rest. Jiajiajiaku. Jiajia, in the months after my sister's graduation, life took on a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. Steady, calm, self-directed. There were no guilt-driven transfers, no late night panic calls, no invisible debts hanging over me like ghosts. The silence that once frightened me had become my peace, and that peace began to echo into everything I touched. Ta-da! The platform I'd started with Imran grew faster than we'd imagined. What began as a few online workshops turned into a full-scale program with partnerships, sponsorships, and even government grants. We called it Project Balance. The name came from the same word I had once written in my journal. The one that reminded me that revenge wasn't destruction, it was restoration. Ta-da! Every time I spoke to a group of students, I told them a version of my story. Not the details, just the essence. How giving without boundaries destroys both the giver and the gift. I told them that love without respect turns into control, and generosity without limits turns into chains. The students would listen in silence, their eyes reflecting recognition. Many of them had lived the same story in different forms. And when they applauded, it didn't feel like validation. It felt like connection. Tada, one day, while preparing for a national seminar, I received an unexpected letter in the mail. An old-fashioned envelope with familiar handwriting. My father's. Inside was a single page. Tada, son, I saw your interview on TV. I watched you talk about respect, about learning when to stop giving. I didn't realize how much those words came from us. From what we did. I don't know if we can ever fix it, but I want to try. I'm learning to handle my own finances again. Your mother started volunteering at a community kitchen. Maybe it's too late to change the past, but we're trying to deserve your forgiveness, not demand it. Tarjadansa, I read it 3 times, my throat tightening with something I couldn't name. I didn't cry. I just sat there, feeling the quiet weight of evolution. The kind that doesn't erase wrongs but transforms them. Teja, later that week, my sister called. Mom and Dad talk about you all the time now, she said. They've changed, bye. It's slow but it's real. I smiled. Good. That's all I ever wanted. For them to see. You know. She added softly, you didn't just change them. You changed me too. After the call, I walked to my balcony. The city stretched before me. Busy, alive, chaotic, just like life itself. I realized something. Closure isn't a door slamming shut. It's the moment you realize the lock was never there. I wasn't their ATM anymore. I wasn't their guilt-ridden son or their financial lifeline. I was simply me, flawed, free, and finally whole. The best revenge wasn't the silence or the exposure. It was standing there, alive and peaceful, knowing that I'd rewritten the story they once controlled. Because in the end, the greatest justice is not watching them fall. It's rising so high they have to look up to see you. Forgiveness is a bridge you build for yourself, not for the ones who burned it. I learned that the hard way. For months after my father's letter, I carried his words around like a stone in my pocket. Heavy but grounding. I didn't rush to reply. I wanted to be sure that if I forgave them, it wouldn't be out of habit or guilt, but out of growth. Then, one late afternoon, I found myself driving back to my hometown. Not for them, at least that's what I told myself. My sister had asked me to visit for her birthday, and I said yes. But deep down, I knew the truth. Part of me wanted to see what had become of the people who once broke me. When I reached the old house, memories hit me like echoes. Those narrow hallways where I'd once walked with pride and fear tangled together, the worn sofa where I'd sat counting how much more I could give. My mother opened the door before I could knock. She looked smaller, somehow gentler. You came, she whispered, eyes welling. Inside, the air smelled of tea and nostalgia. My father was sitting quietly at the table, newspaper folded beside him. When he saw me, he stood, but didn't approach. He just nodded. I nodded back. The silence between us wasn't hostile anymore. It was reflective. We talked for a while. About my sister, my work, the weather. Small talk, but peaceful. There were no hidden requests, no guilt-laced compliments. Just presence. Then, as I was about to leave, my father said softly, "You were right to stop us. We didn't see it then, but we do now. You taught us something no one else could." My throat tightened. "I didn't want to teach you," I said quietly. "I just wanted to be loved for more than what I could give." My mother reached across the table, her hand trembling. "You are," she said, her voice cracking. "We just forgot how to show it." Turns out that was the moment I forgave them. Not with words, but with breath. Because forgiveness isn't something you declare. It's something you feel loosen inside you. Before I left, I handed my father a small envelope. "This isn't money," I said with a faint smile. Inside was an invitation to the upcoming anniversary gala of Project Balance. Come see what you helped create. Maybe it'll help us both remember how far we've come. As I drove away, I looked in the rear view mirror and saw them standing at the doorway, side by side. They weren't the same people who once laughed at my expense. They were older, humbled, learning. Maybe that was enough. The road ahead shimmered under the setting sun, and I realized something quietly powerful. Revenge had never been about making them suffer. It was about breaking the cycle. About showing that love, once twisted by greed, could still heal in the right light. And for the first time, I didn't feel like their son or their ATM. I felt like my own person, free, steady, and at peace. The night of the gala felt like a dream painted in gold and glass. The venue shimmered under warm lights, laughter blending with the gentle hum of a live band. Project Balance had grown beyond anything I could have imagined. A symbol of self-worth, healing, and boundaries for people who, like me, had once been used, drained, or forgotten. I walked through the crowd, shaking hands, smiling at faces lit with gratitude. Some were former clients, others were partners and investors who believed in the mission. Cameras flashed, but for once I wasn't performing. I was present. As the program began, the host announced my name. "Founder and CEO of Project Balance, please welcome." Applause erupted, and I took the stage. My heart beat in rhythm with the lights. But when my eyes swept across the audience, they stopped. Tada, my parents were there, sitting in the third row. My mother's hands clutched the invitation I'd sent, now creased and trembling. My father looked older, smaller in the suit I'd once bought him years ago. They both smiled faintly when I met their eyes. It wasn't pride or apology, it was recognition. Taja, I took a deep breath and began. Taja, when I started Project Balance, I said, my voice steady but thick with memory. It wasn't just about financial awareness or emotional healing. It was about reclaiming your worth when others try to define it for you. Taja, the room went still. Taja, there was a time, I continued, when I thought love meant sacrifice. That being needed was the same as being loved. But I learned the hard way that when people love what you give more than who you are, it's not love, it's dependence dressed as affection. Taja, I didn't name names. I didn't have to. The truth had already lived its life. This was about closure. Taja, tonight, I said, smiling faintly, I dedicate this project to everyone who has ever felt like an ATM instead of a person. To everyone who's been taken for granted and found the courage to walk away. Not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Taja, applause thundered, some people even standing. But the only thing I heard was the sound of my father clapping slowly, his eyes glistening. My mother covered her mouth with her hand, tears spilling freely. Dead after the speech, they approached me quietly. No cameras, no crowd. My father reached into his pocket and pulled out an old photograph, me at 10 years old, holding my first drawing of our family. We lost sight of this, he said, voice breaking. But you brought it back. You reminded us who we used to be. Taja, my mother hugged me. We're proud of the man you became, she whispered. Taja, I hugged her back. Not because I'd forgotten, but because I'd forgiven. The pain was part of the story, but it didn't define the ending. Jada, later that night, as I stood alone on the balcony, city lights stretching endless,